I know this channel is predominantly for makers, but if you use a computer and a keyboard and mouse on a regular basis, then I would strongly advise that you watch the whole of this video. So whether it's for audio and video editing, or perhaps graphic design and Photoshop work, or even just data entry or Excel work, any computer use at all where you're using a keyboard and mouse all the time, this is going to be a very, very relevant video for you. I'm well aware this video is massif. Just watch it in sections, come back to it. There's nothing I can really leave out. I have tried, I've re-edited it so many times. I could probably not say all this. I'm going to split this into 4 different sections. First of all, we're going to have a bit of follow-up from the last video where I actually made the desk. Secondly, I want to cover a bit about what RSI is and what the symptoms are. Thirdly, I'm going to cover off some of the ergonomic side of things. And then the final part of this video is going to be looking at some of the tech that I'm now using. Traditional keyboard and mouse is gone. To give a bit of a kind of broad range of applications, I'm going to cover off 3D design in SketchUp. I'm going to cover off kind of data entry stuff in Excel. I'm going to cover off a little bit of using this setup for things like Photoshop, and I'm also going to use Vegas, which is what I use for video editing. A little bit of follow-up from last time. Well done to everyone who spotted my kind of deliberate, stupid mistake. The first few people to catch it was Andrew Cartledge, Andy James, Dave Charlesworth, Malcolm Poole and Alan Mullock, but I think a few other people caught it as well. Yes, you all spotted that I didn't alternate the grain direction on the boards, which I should have done. I thought 15-year-old scaffolding boards that have been drying out in a garage for best part of 3 years would have been relatively stable and would have done all the warping that we're going to do over the last however many 15 years or so. Oh, how wrong was I? So anyway, so what I did was I ignored the rules of woodworking in favour of trying to get the nicest boards all pointing upwards. And yes, I was completely wrong. They have warped, especially at the back. The framework kind of keeps them fairly flat, but the back board especially has warped quite a lot, and there's very little I can do about it. I can maybe try and bolt box section or something underneath and try and force it back to flat again. Don't ignore the rules of woodworking. Some other follow-up questions from Graham O'Carroll, who was asking about the design process I went through to make the desk. And to be honest, it's all based around 2 things. One is the ergonomic side of things, which I'll be covering in a second, and the other is the limitations or the specs of the IKEA legs that I was using. I knew I was going to use the IKEA adjustable legs rather than making my own, but I also knew that I needed 1.8 meters that way, and that was all based around how big my monitors are, and then also having sufficient room either side of the monitors for my speaker rises. Oh, and I didn't use SketchUp or anything because it is just basically a flat top desk surface. There's nothing to design, so I didn't really need SketchUp. I already had the speaker rises. John mentioned that he is considering using a tablet for Photoshop use, and would I cover off a little bit on that? Yes, end of the video, or well, towards the end of the video, I will be covering that off. It is amazing for Photoshop. And Mark has asked about what video editing software I use and will I cover that off, and yes, I will be doing that as well. I use Vegas. It used to be Sony Vegas, it's now Magic's Vegas, so I'm using Vegas Pro 15. I think 16's out now, and it is amazing for video editing as well, so I will be covering that off later on. Well, first of all, I am in no way qualified to talk about RSI, so I'm just going to give you my kind of interpretation and experience of what I've ended up going through here. RSI, also known as tendonitis, is a repetitive strain injury. The particular variant that I seem to have is a thing called mouse arm, which is basically from using a computer mouse too much, and it's just these tiny little movements, especially of your index finger on a mouse, with your arm at this kind of slightly unnatural twisted angle, because your arm, if you just kind of flop your arms at your side, and I've talked about this for years and years, teaching people how to play the drums, which is another passion of mine, but if you just kind of flop your arms at your side and bring your arms up to a natural position, your arms don't want to sit like that, they want to sit like that. So when you use a computer mouse, instead of at your arm's natural position, which is kind of like that, instead you're using it in this twisted motion and using it on a really regular basis. Your index finger on the main left click of the mouse, look at the muscle that moves when you use your index finger. It's this muscle running up your forearm here. The symptoms can be anything from mild pain through to severe pain and permanent damage. In my case, I've lost about 90 degrees of anti-clockwise twisting motion of my right arm. So whereas I used to be able to do that with both arms, now this arm I can only get it to there. I'm getting stabbing pains up my forearm here. In the early days of having RSI, when it first started, it really affected my sleep patterns because I was getting the shooting pains up my arm in the middle of the night. It would get especially bad if my arm was in one position for a long period of time. And I would also regularly wake up with a completely dead arm as well, which is another quite a common symptom of RSI. In my case, it's not tender to the touch. I can quite happily just, nothing like that hurts at all. In fact, it's quite nice. And most frustratingly for me, I am a very bad piano player, but I love playing the piano. And because of the angle that you have to have your hands at on the piano, you've got to have your hands pretty much horizontal on the keys. You can't play a piano the way you would do like a vertical mouse or a sculpted keyboard or whatever. And because of that, it is incredibly painful playing the piano now. So just to illustrate how much of a serious problem this might be globally, and this is very unscientific, but this is Google Trends. Google Trends lets you map out how much a particular term is being searched for around the planet. If we just search for forearm pain, and then we show the results globally since 2004, more than tripled in popularity as a search term over the last, 15 years or thereabouts. If we look at the countries who are searching for it, we've got US, Canada, Australia, UK and Ireland, which makes sense because they're all English-speaking countries, so you're not going to get people in France searching for forearm pain. They would search for it in whatever the French for forearm pain is. The really interesting thing is then if we have a look at a bit data of how many computers exist worldwide, and I found that information on this site here, which is nakono.com. Personal computers per 100 inhabitants, desktop PCs and laptops, so it's not including things like mobile phones and smartphones and things. We're going to just have a look at the figures for 2012. And if we filter out all of the non-English speaking countries who wouldn't be searching for the term forearm pain, and we only show the English speaking countries. And isn't that interesting how that almost correlates perfectly, with the exception of New Zealand. I don't know what they're doing differently in New Zealand. As I say, very unscientific. There could be many, many other reasons for why that happens to match up so closely. Read into that what you will. A traditional keyboard and mouse are dead in my view. They are outdated technology. How we have been using them for 25 years without moving into a much more sensible way of operating computers is beyond me. If you're still using a normal keyboard and mouse on a computer, put it in the bin and take everything that I'm going to tell you in this video seriously. Again, I'm no expert on ergonomics. I'm just trying to tell you the information that I've kind of researched and found out, and hopefully I can explain it in a way that is simple to understand. I'll include a link in the description to the build video for this actual desk if that's of interest, or you can just go out and buy a desk. But there's a few key things, a few key considerations that you need to get right before even thinking about the tech. What I did, I started off with, I got myself a new chair. I must admit, of all the things that I've got, the chair's probably the thing that I'm most disappointed with. The back rest seems to be a little bit too far back and I can't adjust it to bring it any further forwards. I would suggest you get a chair where you've got control over the angle of the backrest, which this chair doesn't have. So the first thing I did was I got the chair to a comfortable height so that when I'm sitting on it, nice and comfortably, my feet are flat on the floor. And that's kind of my starting position because that dictates everything. Then I've based my desk height on the height of my armrests on the chair, so that when my arms are resting on the armrests, my arms are also resting comfortably on the desk. As it happens for me, that puts the desk at about 71 centimeters or 28 inches. But obviously that'll be different for you because you're a different shape to me. I've made my monitor risers so that the top of my monitors are more or less at or just below the height of like eye level, basically. And that also gives us this nice space underneath here where I can, you know, I can shove everything under here and have a huge, great big working area if I'm doing paperwork or other things. Like, for example, I'm not precious about this desk. I use it for soldering and all sorts of things, which is why I wanted a solid wood desk rather than any kind of horrible composite hollow material. So as I say, monitors at or just below eye level, pointing kind of at me. You're not going to point your monitors away from you. I meant like angled. Speaker risers, if you are fussy about your audio and your sound, you should really have your tweeters roughly at eye level or your tweeters roughly at ear level. The one other consideration for your monitor setup is having them roughly arm's length away from you when you're sitting comfortably at your desk. So a couple of other things with this desk that I've done just to make my life a little bit easier. First of all, I've made a little pen holder to hold the pen for the tablet. That is really quite a key thing because you want it to be really easy to switch between the tablet and being able to type, in which case you want somewhere to put your pen. Having it laying flat on the tablet didn't work at all for me. It was an awful way of working. You need a pen holder of some description to keep it at the angle that your wrist is already at. I've also moved all of my commonly used USB connections up to desk height. So I've got USB Type B, I've got a USB Type B Mini, a USB Type B Micro, and a female USB Type A connector for memory card reader and basically anything else that I need to connect up. This particular set of legs from IKEA comes with quite a nifty little cable management net as well, which is really easy to attach onto a solid wood desk, and that just keeps all of the cables neat and tidy underneath the back side of the desk. You'll see I've also got the mixing desk over on the left hand side now. This makes life so much easier because it means that when I'm working and I've got the pen in one hand, I can adjust levels using my left hand without putting the pen down. You want to do everything you can to minimize the amount of times that you're putting the pen down, because that is what slows down your workflow when you're having to put it down and pick it up all the time. Finally, one little trivial thing that I've done as well is I've put everything apart from the computer onto remote sockets, because before I'd have to go around switching on the speakers, switching on the monitors, switching on the desk, switching on the audio. Now it's all just on a set of remote sockets. As I say, with the exception of the computer, that's on a permanently on socket because you don't want to accidentally switch your computer off. But everything else is on remote sockets, and that just makes life much, much easier for just switching everything on and off at the beginning and end of the day. Right, let's talk about all the tech, because this is the exciting bit and this is the game changer for me, but you've got to get everything else right first. There's links to everything in the description of this video. So first of all, the key difference that replaces the mouse is this Wacom Intuous M Bluetooth pen tablet. This cost around £180 and was the most expensive part of the tech that I've bought here to change this setup. We've then got the Microsoft Sculpt Ergonomic keyboard with separate numeric keypad which I'm keeping over on the left-hand side here to give my left hand more to do. The keyboard with the numeric keypad was about £70. Then over here for my left hand, we've got the Contour ShuttlePro version 2 jog wheel. This, in my view, is absolutely key to the whole setup, and I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail very shortly. And then finally, really just as a bit of a backup, I've got the Anker vertical mouse. Now, I don't really tend to use it now that I've got the tablet. I try and force myself to use the tablet for pretty much everything, but just in case I run into the odd application where the tablet doesn't work, I haven't found anything where it doesn't work yet, or for example, if I've accidentally misconfigured the tablet and now I can't click on anything, which is a more common thing that you might do, I've got the vertical mouse as a backup. The Anker vertical mouse was only 12 or 13 pounds. It was dead cheap. It's really, really comfortable to use. It's in that natural position that your hand is in when you just move your hand onto the mouse. You're no longer in this kind of slightly contorted position that you would use a mouse in. And I can use it completely interchangeably with the tablet. So I can go from using the tablet to using the mouse and back to the tablet again without having to reconfigure anything. If nothing else, get yourself the vertical mouse for the sake of 13 quid. So yes, that is about 350 quid on gear there, but to be fair, that's a fraction of what I would spend on, for example, a new laptop or a new PC. Even a new mobile phone these days is a lot more than 350 quid. So it's a small price to pay for your health and for being able to work in a comfortable position. And at the end of the day, it's a one-time purchase. You know, you can upgrade your machine as many times as you want. This should last forever, technically, as long as you look after it. The Wacom tablet is either wired via USB or Bluetooth. You can use it without anything plugged into it at all and then use it in Bluetooth mode if you want. I just keep it permanently plugged in because I can't be bothered charging it up all the time. The keyboard and numeric keypad are wireless via a USB receiver that plugs into a USB socket on your computer. As is the mouse, that also is wireless and goes via a USB receiver that plugs into your computer. The Contour ShuttlePro at the moment is wired only, so again, doesn't bother me at all. I would, to be honest, rather it was wired than having to think about charging it up all the time. We'll start by having a quick look at the Microsoft Sculpt Ergonomic keyboard. This is the newest part to my setup and really was the final step in getting everything sorted. It's got some really nice features on it, such as the magnetic stand for the front, which just literally magnetizes on, which is a really nice feature. Also, the battery compartment is magnetic as well, which is quite a nice, nifty touch, I think. I think that's lovely. It takes a bit of getting used to the ergonomic keyboard layout, but to be honest, it's taken me about 1 or 2 weeks and I'm more or less completely used to it now. It does force you to touch type more, because I found myself occasionally trying to jump over to this side of the keyboard with my left hand, and obviously that's not what you should be doing. So you should have your index finger on the F key on your left hand and your index finger on the J key on your right hand. That is kind of your starting position, and try and work your way around the keys from there. If possible, try and learn how to touch type correctly. That will make life a lot quicker. I quite like the physical switch for switching the function keys between function key mode and function mode. We've just got a little white blob or a little blue blob, and it just switches what these keys along the top row do. Some people hate that and prefer that you hold a key down. I quite like that you can just put it into blue mode and now those keys do a completely different thing. But you'll either like that or hate it. I quite like it. I don't mind it. The split spacebar feels really nice, and I also really like the calculator shortcut key, which is both on this side on your keyboard to bring the calculator up, and we've also got it on the numeric keypad, and that is such a handy little feature because I mainly use the numeric keypad for the calculator. So now I can literally just press that button, it brings the calculator up, I can do my things. It'd be quite nice if they'd added a button to close the calculator, like an Alt F4 button or something, but there isn't one, such is life. I'm slightly concerned about the lifespan of the wrist rest. As you can see, it's only a couple of weeks old and we've already got some signs of wear along this front edge here where my right wrist rests on it. But I have to say, it is very, very comfortable to use. It just puts your wrists into what is the perfect position for typing, as far as I can tell. You don't have to use it with the riser on the front, but I've tried it both ways, without and with the riser, and I've found it much more comfortable with the riser. But obviously you use it in a way that is comfortable for you. The tablet is the game changer for me. As I say, this has completely replaced the mouse. There are cheaper tablets available, but I'm very happy with this particular one. As briefly mentioned before, you've got to have a pen holder. I would not use it keeping the pen in this place at the top here. It's completely impractical. You want the pen to be at the angle needed to just pop the pen down when you're not using it and you want to type. You also get very quick at switching between kind of putting your pen into a storage position such as that and doing a little bit of typing and then going back to using your tablet. You start to get very quick at that motion, I've found. But generally, if you're doing any serious amount of typing, pop your pen in storage and then just type away. The pen rarely touches the surface of the tablet, and this is maybe a bit of a misconception that people have with tablets, is that you don't constantly drag the tip of the pen over the tablet. You would only do that really for dragging and dropping or actually physically drawing and stuff like that. But for general use, where if you're just moving the pointer around on the screen, then the pen nib doesn't touch the tablet. It just hovers above. It's amazing. And it's incredibly accurate. So you get very used to this kind of using this finger here as a bit of a spacer for keeping the pen nib at a suitable height. It's the closest thing that I can describe of just feeling where you want the pointer to go and it just goes there. The pen itself comes with spare nibs kept in the back end of the pen, and it's also got the nib remover on the front side, so you pop that in and just kind of put it at an angle and pull to get your nib out. And then we've got 3 programmable buttons. We've got the tip that I have set to do a left click. We've got the front button that I've got set to do a double click, and we've got the other button which I've got set to do a right click. I very rarely use these buttons at all. The only things that I use is the left click tip, and I mainly just use that for dragging and dropping and drawing. We've then got 4 programmable buttons across the top of the tablet here, and these can be set up to do anything you want on a per application basis. So for example, in Vegas, I've got this set up to switch between different color correction modes, and I've also got these 2 buttons here to do insert audio track and insert video track. The software for the tablet is really easy to use. You can either program up a kind of global setting for everything, or you can then do the per application stuff up here. The way that I've got it set up, I very rarely use the per application stuff other than for Vegas. We'll start off by configuring the tablet itself, and that is the buttons across the top of the tablet. And as I say, I've got Vegas set to do normal view for the top left button. I've got color correction view for the next one, and then I've got insert audio track and insert video track that you can see on here. Dead easy. You just go into these little options here and you can tell it to do literally anything that you want. You've then got all your pen controls on your next one along. So this is where you configure what you want the tip to do, what you want the first button to do, which I've got to double click, and the top button which I've got set to right click. You can also control your tip feel and the double click distance. I have to say, the one annoying thing with this tablet is accidental double clicks, especially in Vegas where a double click can do something that you might not want it to do. And I've found this double click distance thing just makes no difference whatsoever. I've never been happy with the way this handles double clicks, which is why one of the reasons I never use double clicks these days, and I've got it programmed up as a button on the Contour, but we'll come back to that. The mapping side of things controls how you want this mapped against whatever's on your screen. So because I'm using two monitors, you have to think, well, what happens when I've got the pen over the right hand side and what happens when I've got the pen over the left hand side? So I've got it set with full screen resolution but force proportion switched on. That effectively means that I'm just using the top rectangular section of the pad to do everything. And if I'm doing everything on the left hand monitor, I'm only using 25% of the real estate of the pad. Obviously, the more of the pad that you're using, the more accurate you're going to be. But on the flip side, you're also going to be moving your hand around more. So I quite like that I can do everything just from this top little corner of the pad here. But then when I want to go over to the right-hand monitor, I can do, and I can work over there as well. But if you switch force proportions off, then you can use the entire pad, or you can tell it on an application level to only go to one particular monitor. So you can say, for example, when you're using Vegas, well, I wouldn't do that because I'd always use Vegas with two monitors, but maybe with Photoshop, tell it to only use monitor number 1. And then in Photoshop, you can use your entire tablet real estate. I have tried it both ways, and I found that getting used to switching between a tablet being that size and being that size, I found that more confusing than it's worth, and I just permanently leave it on full proportions so that I'm only ever using this top area. Obviously, if you're using Photoshop to do a lot of like drawing and stuff like that, I would suggest you probably set it to the monitor 1 or monitor 2 option, depending on what monitor you run Photoshop on. And that's about it for using the tablet. It's so straightforward. As I say, nib generally doesn't touch the tablet surface. It only does so when you're dragging. And as I say, with the way I've got things set up here, I can drag things over onto my right-hand monitor and back over to my left-hand monitor from the tablet, and it all works hunky-dory. The lack of any sort of scroll wheel on a tablet, and I know you can get tablets that have like a programmable scroll wheel thing built in, but they're hopeless. The lack of having a scroll wheel that you would normally have on a mouse, to me, was a complete showstopper. And this is where the ShuttlePro jog wheel has come into its own. If you imagine the tablet has replaced my mouse pointer, this ShuttlePro has replaced my scroll wheel and all the buttons on the mouse, and it's given us a load of extra functionality as well. So I'm going to talk you through all of that now. I would not be able to use this tablet without having the jog wheel, without having the ShuttlePro. So we've got an infinite spin center wheel, which you can program to do anything. I generally always program that up to do whatever the wheel on the mouse would have done. You've then got a quarter turn spring-loaded wheel on the outside. Again, you can program that up to do anything you want. And then you've got 15 programmable buttons all the way around the outside. The software itself is dead easy to use once you get your head around it. Effectively, you've got a set of global settings, but what you're generally going to be doing is programming stuff up per application. It comes pre-programmed for a whole load of applications, but I wouldn't use any of the pre-programmed ones. I would suggest that you get your head around programming it up for buttons that are comfortable for the way you work and the workflow that you've got. I found none of the default buttons made any sense. So just go into the settings and just find a particular one that you want to change, or if it's not there, you just do options and create new settings. And the way it works is that it bases it off the exe file, the executable file of the program that you're trying to run. So for example, if I'm wanting to run SketchUp, and if you're not sure, just right click on the SketchUp shortcut, go to properties, and you'll see the path to the executable there. So you would then just go into the options here, do create new settings, create empty settings, find the executable, which in this case it's already gone into that particular folder just by complete chance, and then do open, and then that will program it up for that particular application. It's really straightforward. I'll take you through my default settings that I use for everything, because you want to try and keep the buttons as similar as possible between all of your applications, so you're not having to think about it too much. But then there's a lot of stuff that I have programmed up which is unique to that particular application. But as I say, I've always got the center wheel, the infinite spin wheel, set to do whatever the mouse wheel would do. And then I've got these 3 buttons on my right hand side to control with the thumb. I've got these set to do single click, a single left click down the bottom, double click and right click. Dead easy to set up. For example, for double click, you just click on the button, you'll see it turns green on the screen, and then you tell it what you want it to do. So you say you want it to do a right click. You could do a right double click if you wanted. You can tell it to do repeat. You could do triple clicks and all sorts. I'll come back to that for SketchUp. So I never have to double click a mouse ever again. I've got a button to double click. So I get very used to just switching either between single click and double click. Then I've got this row of buttons at the top set to do copy, paste, cut and undo. I find that for me that works out really well, and I set it the same way for every application. So these are generally always copy, paste, cut and undo. And then all the other buttons, these 5 here and these 3 here, I have programmed up to do stuff which is kind of unique to the application that I'm using. So I'll start by showing you SketchUp, because SketchUp works fantastically well. As before, I've got copy, paste, cut and undo, left click, double click, right click and wheel function. And then I've got these 5 buttons set to do R for rectangle, O for orbit or look around, H for a hand, pan, M for move, P for push pull, and then over on this side here, check this out, I've got this one set to do deselect, triple click and make component. Let me show you that in SketchUp. I'll just make a box, drag out the box using my tablet, push pull, deselect, triple click, make component. Done. I can now move that around. Deselect, single click, delete. I'll just show you as well, just for making some simple objects. We'll go to rectangle, just drag it out, push pull. We'll draw another rectangle on this top corner. Oops, undo, push pull. We'll do another rectangle here, push pull. You can get the general idea of how quick this is to navigate around once you get used to it. Orbit around to have a look, or the hand pan tool to move left and right. We'll do one more weird thing on this one. We'll do like a weird kind of slot over here. Orbit. How quick is that? Deselect, triple click, make component. Move, and that can move the object. It's so quick once you get used to it. And you just program up the buttons the way you want to program them up, but I've found that this configuration works pretty well. I've tried it with like the line tool and stuff, but I use the rectangle tool more than anything for the sort of work that I do for joinery work. And then we've just got zoom in and out on the wheel here. Look at that, lovely. It's an absolute pleasure to use. It's the closest thing I've found to an extension of what my brain is thinking and getting it down onto the computer. Much, much easier. Once you're used to it, it's way, way easier than using the mouse and all the keyboard shortcuts. There you go, SketchUp in a nutshell. I'll quickly show you around Excel. Excel's a funny one because you can, if you use Excel a lot, oh man, this contour thing can do all sorts. As I say, I've just got the jog wheel set to do whatever the mouse wheel would do, which is just scrolling up and down the sheet. Let me just fill in this with a bit of stuff so we can actually see what we're doing. And let's say, for example, you want to insert a row. Normally for inserting a row into a sheet, you would like go and right click and do insert. Well, what I've done instead, if I go into here, go into the Excel options. So usual buttons for copy, paste, cut, undo, left click, double click, right click. Center infinite spin wheel is set for the mouse wheel, whatever the mouse wheel does. I've set the outside wheel to do left and right keystroke. Look at this. So I can do moving across cells using the outer wheel, which is quite nice. So I don't have to put the pen down and jump over onto the arrow keys. I can just move around using the outer spring-loaded jog wheel, which is lovely. Then I've got these buttons set up to do insert row or column, delete row or column, and then I've got nothing else really set up at the minute. Jury's out on what I want to set these ones to at the minute. I've also not got these 3 buttons programmed. So I'm still thinking about the best way that I want to set up Excel for all these other buttons. I could program those up to do all sorts. But I do a lot of stuff in spreadsheets where I insert or delete rows. And now I can do that just by, look, insert, or insert columns, or delete columns, or delete rows, just at the touch of a button like that. Dead easy. That's Excel for me. Then Photoshop. Again, I'm no expert with Photoshop, but I'll show you how I've got it set up. So I've got Photoshop set up with the usual controls of copy, paste, cut, undo, left click, double click, right click, and mouse wheel. At the moment, I've got the outer wheel set for shift and page up and shift and page down. We'll not worry about that for the second. But then I've got these buttons set to do M for rectangle marquee, V for the move tool, T for the text tool, U for the rectangle tool, and H for the hand tool. So I can draw a rectangle marquee, fill it. Really bad example here. Switch to the move tool, move it somewhere, whatever. Add some text, switch to the text tool. Oops, undo, ditch that. We've got hand pan for moving around a document that you might be zoomed in on, which is really handy. And I've got the rectangle tool set up as well. I've also got these buttons here set up to do scale and brightness and contrast, which is just something that I use all the time when I'm doing things like YouTube thumbnails. As I say, I only use really basic functionality in Photoshop, but if you're a power user of Photoshop, you can make this setup work immensely efficiently for you. Vegas is where this comes into its own for me for video editing, so I'll take you through the setup as quickly as I can. So, as per usual, copy, paste, cut, undo, left click, double click, right click, and the jog wheel, as per usual, is set up to do what the mouse wheel does. And then for the rest of the customized buttons, I've got the spring-loaded jog wheel set to do a kind of scrub on the track. I'll just show you that quickly within Vegas itself. So if I'm playing, what you want to get is so I can do that sort of thing, and then just zooming in and out using the center infinite spin wheel. I find that works fantastically for my workflow, and if I'm just wanting to literally work through a track quite quickly, I can do that with the outer spring-loaded wheel. Then for the buttons, I have split, so splitting a track. At the moment, I haven't got this second button programmed to do anything. I think I did have that set to undo, but then I standardized on having undo appear, because it would be very common that you split and then you split in the wrong place and then you need to do undo. But now undo lives up there. I've got normal edit tool, selection edit tool, and ripple edit. So just to show you that within Vegas again, so it's easy, well, this tool here at the bottom, so I can do ripple edit on and off. So just to show you that in action, normally if you were doing a normal edit, you would just be doing this sort of thing. But if I put it into ripple edit mode, it gets everything to move with it. I've then got this selection tool here. This is really handy if I'm just wanting to select a whole bunch of tracks, and maybe I just want to, I don't know, move those to a different set of tracks, or there's all sorts of reasons why having that set up as a shortcut is very handy. And then I can just easily switch back to the normal edit tool as well. And then over on the left hand side here, I'll just show you within the control panel, I've got play from start. Haven't got that button set up, I've got a spare button at the minute, and I've just got play pause. So play pause and play from start. Don't program up buttons just for the sake of it. Put some thought into your workflow and whether or not you actually need to bother having a programmed button to do something. So back into Vegas, just to show you my actual workflow in Vegas itself. So I can just happily zoom in and out of tracks, do all of my editing, and just play with that button there. Folders. I never have to double click folders, go into various folders. I never pause it, split the track, maybe take a section out. I'm still in ripple edit mode, so that'll move along, but maybe I didn't want to be. I can just switch it over with that button there. Now I'm no longer in ripple edit. Back into ripple edit mode. And then I've decided, oh no, I've mucked the whole thing up. I can just undo everything and go through my undo history. That all works awesome. Once I've finished an edit and I want to listen to the whole thing from the beginning. Hiya, welcome back. Last week I was talking about the build easy as that. Everything else is pretty standard on the actual jog wheel. Your left clicks, double clicks. As I say, the one slightly annoying thing is that it's very easy to do an accidental double click with your right hand. It'll not do one now, but if you double click in Vegas, it brings you into this kind of track mode, which I despise. And then you have to double click again to get out of that mode. And if you accidentally do that with your right hand while you're just trying to drag and drop something, that can become slightly annoying. I wish there was a way of just completely disabling double click via the tablet. And then on the tablet itself, so the only thing I'm using on the tablet is basically either hovering around to move the cursor or dragging and dropping to move tracks or do things like envelope edits and fade edits and stuff like that. So that's where my tip would be touching the tablet. Tip of the pen would be touching the tablet for that. Or if I'm just kind of hovering around and just clicking or whatever, then the tip isn't touching the tablet at all. Shortcut buttons here, as I say, switching between normal edit view and color correction view. So this just gives me a single button to press and I'm straight away into color correction mode. Another button and I'm back into normal edit modes. And then the only other shortcuts I've got here for inserting tracks and audio tracks. So literally insert audio tracks and insert video tracks. Dead easy, undo, undo. If I'm just like putting some B-roll in or something, switch into normal edit, out of ripple edit, copy the B-roll over, play, with that sort of thing. But everything is now on a remote. Really bad place for that B-roll footage, but you get the general idea. That's Vegas in a nutshell, and I can still do any other shortcuts via the keyboard, and obviously you're going to be using the keyboard for typing. And another nice little thing, by having the numeric keypad over on the left here, if I do need the enter key for something, as opposed to having to jump all the way over to here to hit return, I can just use my little finger on the numeric keypad to get to the enter key. That's quite a handy one for SketchUp as well, because obviously in SketchUp you're typing in dimensions and you're going to be doing that via the numeric keypad predominantly, and you can get straight on the enter key there as well without having to move around here too much. I need to shut up. This video must be about 5 hours long. To wrap all this up, in my view, a traditional keyboard and mouse are dead. if you've got them and you use a computer on a regular basis, if nothing else, get a vertical mouse. But strongly consider going for this kind of setup that I've switched to. You need to take RSI seriously. Don't do what I did, which is just to ignore it and brush it under the carpet and pretend that it was a thing that didn't really exist, and then get it and then incessantly whinge about it. It does take a bit of getting used to. As I say, probably 2 to 3 weeks, and 350 quid for all of the gear that I bought here. In the long run, I think that is a small price to pay to sort things out and prevent the kind of damage that you can get from using a computer and mouse incorrectly. If you've made it right to the end of this gargantuan video, well done. Longest video I've ever made, I think. As per usual, pop any comments below, links in the description to all of the products used. Share it around to anyone you know who uses a computer on a regular basis who might be impacted by RSI. And finally, if you are a fan of making things and a bit of woodworking and everything else to do with entertainment for makers, then don't forget to hit subscribe. And I shall see you next time, and we'll be back, I think, to something to do with wood, probably MDF. See you later. Bye.